December 16, 1944, 0530 hours, Schnee-Eifel Ridge, Belgian-German border. The early morning chill bit through the thick layers of frost covering the ridgeline. German troops assembled quietly, their boots crunching through the frozen mud, preparing to launch what would later be remembered as the Battle of the Bulge, their most ambitious offensive since the opening campaigns of 1940. Across the ridge, roughly 200,000 German soldiers were convinced they had the upper hand. Intelligence reports and propaganda had instilled in them the belief that American soldiers were materially wealthy but spiritually weak, that the average U.S. conscript could not match the stamina or discipline of a seasoned German warrior. Within mere hours, these assumptions would be violently disproven. The stark reality of battlefield firepower was about to overturn every expectation. Central to the Americans' unexpected advantage was the M1 Garand, a semi-automatic rifle that General George S. Patton hailed as the most effective combat weapon ever designed in a letter to the Chief of Ordnance on January 26, 1945. Each American infantryman carried one. By contrast, the typical German soldier of 1944 was armed with the bolt-action Karabiner 98K, a weapon with a lineage stretching back to 1898, almost identical to what his father had used in 1918. This rifle required the soldier to manually cycle the bolt after every shot. Lift, pull back, push forward, lock down. Even a highly trained marksman could fire no more than about 15 aimed rounds per minute under combat conditions. German infantry tactics revolved around the MG-42 machine gun, a formidable automatic weapon capable of unleashing 1,200 rounds per minute. The riflemen were essentially support personnel for the machine gun, carrying Kar 98Ks as secondary arms for precise targeting and self-defense. This approach had served the German army well from Warsaw to Paris to the outskirts of Moscow. Yet in the Ardennes, American forces had introduced a radical departure from traditional infantry doctrine. Every rifleman was equipped with a semi-automatic weapon capable of discharging 8 rounds as rapidly as the trigger could be pulled, with a complete reload taking less than 3 seconds. Where a German squad might rely on 1 machine gun and 9 rifles, an American squad fielded 1 machine gun, 1 automatic rifle, and 11 semi-automatic rifles, creating a firepower advantage that was virtually insurmountable. The Germans had begun noticing this difference during the North African campaign in 1943. After encounters at Kasserine Pass, reports from German officers highlighted the presence of large numbers of semi-automatic rifles among U.S. forces. Yet the German High Command struggled to comprehend the scale of American industrial output, attributing these sightings either to confusion with submachine guns like the Thompson, or simply doubting that such quantities of semi-automatic rifles could exist. By the time the Ardennes offensive began, German troops would confront firsthand a level of firepower they had previously dismissed, a shock that would redefine their perception of American soldiers and the potential of modern infantry warfare. By early 1943, American arms manufacturers had achieved unprecedented output. Both Springfield Armory and Winchester Repeating Arms were turning out more than 4,000 M1 Garand rifles every single day. Within a year, by the time of the Normandy invasion, over 3 million units had been produced. In stark contrast, the German arms industry, despite its total war mobilization and the extensive use of forced labor, had only managed to manufacture limited experimental batches of semi-automatic rifles. Records from the U.S. Army during the North African campaign revealed that captured German soldiers were often incredulous when confronted with American supply statistics. One German report seized in Tunisia, now archived at the U.S. National Archives, observed, American infantry appeared to be routinely equipped with semi-automatic rifles. Verification seems impossible, as it would demand industrial resources beyond reasonable expectation. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, at 0800 hours on Omaha Beach, the 352nd Infantry Division held positions overlooking the Easy Red Sector. German military reports captured after the battle highlighted the overwhelming volume of American rifle fire. One after-action note stated, "Enemy infantry advances while maintaining near-continuous rifle fire. There is no observable pause for bolt operation. The intensity of their rifle fire surpasses our machine gun emplacements." The brutal engagements that followed D-Day further emphasized the disparity in firepower. In the dense and confined terrain of the Bocage, engagement distances rarely exceeded 100 meters, rendering the German doctrine of long-range precision largely irrelevant. What determined the outcome was the ability to deliver rapid, accurate volleys. A captured training manual from the German 3rd Fallschirmjäger Division, dated July 1944, explicitly acknowledged this advantage, stating that American rifle squads could generate fire equivalent to German machine gun teams, and that conventional suppression methods were largely ineffective against troops armed with semi-automatic rifles. German ordnance officers examining captured M1 Garands were astonished by the combination of precision engineering and mass production. The rifle's gas-operated mechanism used the energy from fired cartridges to automatically cycle the action, while its en-bloc clip system allowed for swift reloading in seconds. Beyond the mechanical design, the consistency of manufacturing tolerances across thousands of rifles was something the Germans could not replicate at scale. An August 1944 technical intelligence report, now preserved in British military archives, emphasized, "The M1 demonstrates production capabilities beyond our reach. Components maintain exacting tolerances across thousands of units. Any single part fits perfectly into another rifle without modification. Interchangeability is complete." Germany's response, the G43, could not match the American standard. While the M1 was standard issue for all U.S. infantrymen, the G43 was largely reserved for snipers and specialist troops. By the end of the war, only 42,713 G43 rifles had been manufactured, a fraction of the over 5.4 million M1 Garands produced. The Battle of the Bulge starkly illustrated the consequences of this firepower imbalance. Despite achieving tactical surprise and often fielding numerically superior forces, German units were repeatedly halted by smaller American formations that could leverage the rapid, continuous fire of their semi-automatic rifles. The outcome underscored that, in modern infantry combat, sustained volume of accurate fire could outweigh both numbers and strategy. December 17, 1944, Elsenborn Ridge. Immediately following the fierce engagement at Elsenborn Ridge, U.S. Army combat debriefings captured in official archives provide detailed insights into the experience of the 99th Infantry Division. Despite being outnumbered in certain sectors by up to 3-1, the division managed to hold its positions largely through relentless rifle fire. One sergeant recounted, "We just kept shooting. 8 rounds, reload, 8 more rounds. They simply couldn't get past that wall of lead." German losses during the first week of their offensive far exceeded the planners' projections. A captured operational directive from the 12th SS Panzer Division highlighted the devastating effect of American small arms. Enemy fire from rifles prevents movement even when they have numerical superiority. Each position must be treated as though defended by automatic weapons.
The statistics were clear. Firepower could decisively blunt an attack, regardless of manpower.
By late 1944, the United States had produced over 4 million M1 Garand rifles. Springfield Armory reached its production apex in January 1944, completing 122,013 rifles that month, an average of 3,936 per day, or roughly 164 per hour, running continuously around the clock. The workforce exemplified the nation's mobilization effort. By June 1943, women constituted 43% of the staff, totaling 5,210 female employees out of 12,950 workers. Many of these women had no prior industrial experience, yet they manufactured rifles meeting or exceeding German quality standards. Other factories contributed significantly to the war effort. Winchester Repeating Arms produced 513,880 rifles, while International Harvester, traditionally an agricultural equipment manufacturer, successfully pivoted to deliver 337,623 M1 Garands. Harrington and Richardson added another 428,600 rifles during and immediately after the war. This distributed production network ensured that no single bombing raid could cripple U.S. rifle output. The M1 Garand fundamentally altered infantry tactics. American squads were capable of advancing while delivering sustained fire, executing so-called marching fire assaults. Training films from 1943, preserved in military archives, document soldiers moving forward in bounds, each capable of firing 8 precise shots while on the move. German tactical manuals from the same year assumed that opposing infantry would rely on bolt-action rifles for movement and suppressive fire. As a result, their calculations for fire density, ammunition usage, and assault strategies underestimated American firepower by a factor of 3. The U.S. Army's 1944 Field Manual 7-10 codified squad tactics around the semi-automatic M1, emphasizing continuous, coordinated fire as the foundation of offensive and defensive maneuvers. Semi-automatic rifles, however, were only as effective as their ammunition supply. Here again, American industry excelled. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant in Missouri, spanning 3,900 acres, produced billions of rounds throughout the conflict. Although exact figures for .30-06 rounds are uncertain, total output reached roughly 7 billion rounds, providing the immense volume of fire necessary for sustained operations. By comparison, German records show that infantrymen were typically issued only 60 rounds per rifleman for offensive actions. American soldiers, by contrast, carried an 80-round basic load in en-bloc clips with virtually unlimited resupply from an extensive logistical network. By January 1945, the German advance had ground to a halt, and U.S. forces launched counterattacks under bitter winter conditions. Cold weather, which often hampered defenders, instead highlighted further advantages of the M1. Bolt-action rifles were significantly less reliable in freezing temperatures. Stiffened mechanisms, thickened lubricants, and numb hands slowed operations. The semi-automatic M1 required only trigger activation, and en-bloc clips could be quickly inserted even with heavy gloves, allowing American infantry to maintain superior rates of fire while German soldiers struggled to load individual rounds into their Karabiner 98K. In sum, the combination of industrial scale, innovative production distribution, semi-automatic firepower, and logistical support enabled American infantry to achieve tactical superiority that traditional German doctrines could not anticipate. The events at Elsenborn Ridge serve as a vivid example of how technology, organization, and sheer production capacity reshaped the battlefield. Medical data collected by the U.S. Army during the Battle of the Bulge revealed that American infantrymen experienced notably fewer cases of frostbite compared to their German counterparts. Analysts attributed this difference in part to the reduced exposure time Americans faced while reloading and firing their weapons.
By March 1945, as U.S. troops prepared to cross the Rhine River, German commanders confronted tactical calculations that increasingly defied logic. Captured planning documents from the town of Rheinhagen showed that German defense strategies were based on centuries-old assumptions. A single defender could hold off 3 attackers, a ratio rooted in Napoleonic military doctrine. These calculations assumed that both sides fired at equivalent rates. However, the American M1 Garand dramatically altered that balance, allowing a single U.S. soldier to discharge rounds at roughly 3 times the rate of a German defender. Traditional defensive formulas suddenly became irrelevant. The Rhine crossings proceeded with fewer casualties than German planners anticipated, largely due to the suppressive power of American small arms fire.
The development and deployment of the M1 Garand cannot be separated from the United States' massive industrial mobilization. Springfield Armory in Massachusetts underwent a remarkable transformation, evolving from a relatively modest arsenal into a sprawling production complex over a mile long. Each rifle was manufactured through more than 1,000 discrete operations, most of them performed by specialized machinery. Efficiency gains were extraordinary. In 1940, producing a single M1 Garand required 117 man-hours. By 1943, this had fallen to 75 hours, and by 1945, Springfield Armory could turn out a rifle with just 31 man-hours of labor at a cost of $31, down from $83 at the start of the war. Workforce composition changed dramatically as well, with women making up 20% of employees in mid-1942, rising to 43% by the following year. These workers, trained in a matter of weeks, operated complex equipment with precision, producing rifles with perfectly interchangeable parts, a level of standardization that German craftsmen, despite years of experience, could not match. The M1 Garand also simplified the process of training infantrymen. U.S. Army records indicate that recruits could reach functional proficiency with the semi-automatic rifle within roughly 2 weeks, in contrast to the months required to master a bolt-action weapon. The rifle's design tolerated imperfect technique, meaning that even an inexperienced or nervous soldier could deliver effective fire. At Fort Benning, Georgia, the infantry school restructured training programs around the M1 Garand. Reports from 1943 demonstrate dramatic gains in recruit performance, with expert qualification rates increasing by 40% compared to training with bolt-action rifles. The rifle's effectiveness was evident even before the Normandy landings. During the Italian campaign, particularly at Monte Cassino from January to May 1944, divisions such as the 34th, 36th, and 45th faced elite German paratroopers in challenging mountainous terrain. Conventional military thought suggested that precision bolt-action rifles would have the advantage in such environments, yet American units discovered that sustained volume of fire outweighed long-range accuracy. The ability to rapidly engage multiple targets while maneuvering across steep slopes proved decisive. Although documentation of M1 Garand use in these specific battles is limited, these divisions were fully equipped with the rifle according to their official tables of organization and equipment. German attempts to replicate this capability were largely unsuccessful. The semi-automatic G43 rifle suffered from both production bottlenecks and reliability issues. Fewer than 43,000 G43s were manufactured, less than a tenth of M1 output. Assembly required extensive hand-fitting, and quality control under late-war conditions was virtually impossible. Maintenance demanded highly trained armorers, and frequent malfunctions rendered the rifles cumbersome and unreliable. Captured German technical reports consistently rated the G43 as inferior to the M1 in terms of reliability, accuracy, and ease of upkeep. In practice, German soldiers often preferred to use captured M1 Garands over their own rifles, despite regulations forbidding the use of enemy arms.
Further confirmation of American small arms superiority came from intelligence gathered in the Pacific Theater. Japanese troops, armed primarily with bolt-action Arisaka rifles and employing tactics similar to German doctrine, were repeatedly overwhelmed by M1-equipped U.S. forces. The simultaneous Battle of Iwo Jima from February to March 1945 reinforced the same lesson. Even in difficult terrain and against determined defenders, American infantrymen armed with semi-automatic rifles achieved success through superior individual firepower. When reports of these outcomes reached German commanders, often through neutral channels, they underscored the increasingly untenable nature of Germany's military situation. After World War II, the U.S. Army Center of Military History carried out extensive post-war interviews that provide invaluable insight into how German soldiers and commanders perceived American weaponry. Reports from these investigations consistently reveal that German troops were taken aback by the firepower of American rifles during combat.
Combat debriefings conducted immediately following engagements captured numerous accounts from German prisoners who expressed surprise and sometimes disbelief at the volume and speed of fire delivered by American infantry. Field Marshal Albert Kessler, who led German forces in Italy, reflected on this in his memoirs after the war, noting that the American foot soldiers, equipped with their semi-automatic rifles, held a firepower edge we could never counter. Our tactical skill offered no advantage when each adversary could discharge 8 rounds for every one of ours. Similarly, General Hasso von Manteuffel, a senior German commander during the Battle of the Bulge, acknowledged during post-war interrogations that the semi-automatic rifles provided American infantry with a decisive operational edge. The German forces, reliant on bolt-action rifles, could not generate sufficient suppressive fire to maneuver effectively under American assaults. Production statistics further underscore this disparity. According to official records, the United States produced the following numbers of M1 Garand rifles. Springfield Armory, 4,188,669. Winchester, 513,800. International Harvester, 337,623, for a total of 5,468,772 rifles. By contrast, Germany's production of the semi-automatic G43 rifle amounted to only 42,713 units across all variants, establishing a ratio of roughly 13-to-1 in favor of the Americans. Peak output also reveals the stark difference. In January 1944, Springfield Armory alone was manufacturing 3,936 M1 Garands per day, whereas all German factories combined managed barely 300 semi-automatic rifles daily. Sustaining these numbers required an extensive logistical system. By 1945, American supply lines were delivering roughly 20 million rounds of ammunition to European forces each day, alongside spare parts sufficient to maintain 3 million rifles and complete depot-level overhaul capability. German logistics, as documented in Wehrmacht quartermaster records, struggled to supply even basic ammunition allocations. Standard German offensive operations allocated only 60 rounds per soldier, compared to the American standard load of 80 rounds with continuous resupply. Economics further amplified this advantage. By 1945, the cost of producing a single M1 Garand had fallen to $31, down from $83 at the start of the war, due to refinements in manufacturing. The German G43, however, cost approximately 350 Reichsmarks, nearly 4 times as much when adjusted for purchasing power, and was less reliable and harder to maintain. American production efficiency extended through the entire supply chain. Highly specialized machinery enabled mass output and reduced per-unit costs, while German factories, often bombed and relocated, could not achieve comparable economies of scale. Documentation in the U.S. National Archives also demonstrate German reactions to American firepower. Intelligence reports drawn from interrogations frequently note German astonishment at the capabilities of American small arms. A particularly revealing example is a German training circular captured in December 1944, which warned troops that American riflemen should be treated as if they were automatic weapon operators. The circular emphasized the need to adjust traditional fire and movement tactics, cautioning that continuous fire from every enemy position should be expected. American commanders were acutely aware of the rifle's battlefield impact. General George S. Patton, in a letter dated January 26, 1945, to Major General Levin H. Campbell, Jr., Chief of Ordnance, described the M1 as the greatest implement of war ever devised. Patton's assessment reflected his observation that superior firepower rather than individual acts of heroism often determines success in combat. The Third Army's rapid advances owed much to infantry units' ability to deliver overwhelming fire without waiting for machine gun support. The M1 Garand, designed by John C. Garand, born Jean-Titius Garand, was the culmination of decades of work beginning at Springfield Armory in 1919. Far more than a simple rifle, it represented a technological and logistical breakthrough that redefined infantry combat, providing the United States with a decisive edge over German forces throughout the European theater. The M1 Garand rifle, whose design was completed in 1932 and officially adopted by the U.S. Army on January 9, 1936, was engineered with mass production in mind. Its creator, John Garand, deliberately structured it so that semi-skilled laborers could assemble it efficiently. Remarkably, Garand transferred all patent rights to the U.S. government, declining any royalties despite millions of rifles being manufactured. His design philosophy prioritized simplicity, reliability, and manufacturability, principles that mirrored the strengths of American industry at the time. Unlike German military doctrine, which often emphasized elite units equipped with specialized weapons, the United States focused on providing every infantryman with the most advanced technology available. The M1 Garand exemplified this approach. It allowed ordinary soldiers to wield unprecedented firepower. Mass production enabled the distribution of cutting-edge capability to every rifleman, reflecting the broader American ethos of democratized opportunity. The rifle that played a pivotal role in victory was produced not only in large factories, but often assembled by housewives and teenagers, then wielded by citizen soldiers, supported by a nationwide industrial apparatus that equated production capacity with military strength. The advantages of the M1 Garand went far beyond individual firefights. Commanders at all levels could plan operations knowing their infantry units enjoyed a significant automatic fire advantage. German officers, on the other hand, had to account for the fact that their soldiers were often outgunned in fundamental combat situations. This disparity influenced everything from small unit patrols to large-scale offensives. U.S. infantry units could act with greater independence and confidence, whereas German units typically relied on machine gun support to mount even modest attacks, limiting their tactical flexibility. Military analysts consistently identify the M1 Garand as a decisive factor in American success. Historian Dr. John Ellis, in The Sharp End of War, calculated that the superior firepower of American infantry reduced casualties by an estimated 40% compared to forces armed solely with bolt-action rifles. The official U.S. Army history of World War II concurs, noting that semi-automatic rifles gave American troops a clear and measurable edge in every theater of operations. Today, the M1 Garand is displayed in museums worldwide as a symbol of industrial ingenuity and military effectiveness. For the German soldiers who faced it, the rifle was a stark representation of American industry overpowering traditional military culture. General Patton famously described it as the finest battle implement ever devised, a judgment repeatedly validated on the battlefield. Its significance extended beyond tactical superiority. The Garand demonstrated that a democratic society with efficient industrial organization could outproduce and outgun totalitarian regimes. The rifle's impact persisted through the Korean War, where UN forces equipped with M1 Garands could repel massed infantry assaults that would have overwhelmed bolt-action units.
The lessons learned from the M1 Garand influenced global military strategy. When West Germany reconstituted its armed forces as the Bundeswehr in the 1950s, semi-automatic rifles became standard issue, reflecting the hard-earned experiences of 1944-45. No modern military would again arm its infantry primarily with bolt-action rifles. The principles of semi-automatic fire for every soldier, established by the M1, became foundational to post-war infantry doctrine. Even the German Sturmgewehr 44, developed in response to encounters with the M1, influenced the design of the Soviet AK-47, which in turn shaped nearly every modern assault rifle. The Garand did not merely win battles, it reshaped warfare itself, proving that firepower at the individual level could match or exceed the influence of artillery and armor.
The rifle also epitomized American industrial philosophy. Every part was designed for straightforward manufacture using specialized machinery and minimally trained workers. In contrast, German production relied heavily on skilled craftsmen, limiting output and slowing deployment. The struggles of the G43 rifle illustrated this difference. Its design suited a system that Germany could not fully support industrially. The M1 Garand, by contrast, represented not just a military triumph, but a validation of democratic industrial society. Free workers could outproduce the labor of a dictatorship. German soldiers, often trained to believe they faced inferior Americans, discovered the harsh reality on the battlefield. They were outmatched not by personal skill, but by technological and industrial superiority. By the time Germany surrendered in May 1945, it had been defeated militarily, economically, and technologically. In sum, the M1 Garand's legacy extends beyond its battlefield performance. It shaped military doctrine, revolutionized small unit combat, and demonstrated the decisive power of industrial capacity in modern warfare. It stands as a testament to the capacity of a democratic society to leverage organization, production, and innovation into strategic advantage, changing the course of World War II and setting the standard for generations of infantry weapons to follow. The M1 Garand emerged as the defining symbol of American military effectiveness during World War II. Unlike the meticulously handcrafted rifles of Germany, this mass-produced firearm was wielded by ordinary soldiers who consistently outperformed highly trained German troops. The numbers were stark. 5.4 million M1 Garands were in the hands of U.S. forces, compared to a mere 42,713 semi-automatic rifles available to the Wehrmacht. At the level of an infantry squad, this translated into nearly 3 times the firepower advantage. Efficiency in American arms manufacturing drove down production costs to roughly a quarter of what equivalent German weapons would have demanded. Training new recruits became faster and simpler because the rifle's design was intuitive, reducing the learning curve dramatically. Beyond statistics, each figure represented lives. Lives saved by superior firepower, and lives lost when outmatched. U.S. soldiers endured because their rifles gave them a decisive edge. German soldiers fell because their standard-issue Karabiner 98K left them outgunned in nearly every encounter. General George S. Patton's description of the Garand as the greatest battle implement ever devised was more than mere hyperbole. Its impact did not rely on precision craftsmanship or intricate mechanics, but on the sheer volume of firepower it could unleash, multiplied by millions of rifles produced across the United States industrial network. To those facing it on the battlefield, the Garand was not just a superior tool, it was a challenge to deeply held beliefs. German troops had been taught to trust in racial hierarchy, military heritage, and personal courage. In every firefight, the M1 Garand demonstrated that these qualities alone could not overcome the combined force of industrial capability and mass production. The rifle illustrated that a democratic society, leveraging collective effort and industrial innovation, could surpass the most professional and ideologically committed armies. 8-round N-block clips and semi-automatic operation became not just a tactical advantage, but a statement. Free societies could organize and equip their citizen soldiers to outperform totalitarian regimes.
The frustration German soldiers felt at the familiar ping of a Garand clip ejecting was more than annoyance. It was the realization that they had underestimated the nature of the enemy and the tools it wielded. Every skirmish reinforced a broader lesson. Modern warfare was increasingly determined not by individual heroism, but by mass production, not by tradition, but by invention, not by warrior ethos, but by industrial strength. In this sense, the M1 Garand's legacy extended beyond the battlefield. It symbolized the capacity of a democratic, industrialized nation to mobilize its resources in ways that could decisively shape global conflict. Today, the M1 Garand endures as a centerpiece in military museums and private collections. After more than 80 years, it remains functional, admired for a design that was revolutionary in its simplicity and effectiveness. It exemplifies American ingenuity, the power of organized industry, and the democratic ideal that every soldier, not just an elite few, should have access to the finest tools available. For those who carried it in combat, the rifle was unforgettable. It transformed ordinary men into combatants with a mechanical advantage that often determined the outcome of engagements. The M1 Garand proved that the future of warfare would favor nations capable of combining technology, mass production, and innovation, rather than those relying solely on ideology or historical precedent. On every battlefield where it served, the Garand validated its reputation as the ultimate battle implement, elevating democracy itself as a weapon against tyranny and leaving a mark on military history that endures to this day.